Hello there. As you can probably see from what the title is, I'm going to be reacting to this very small streamer, Vaush, and his takes on open worlds. Now, this video is more than just about open world games. It's about gaming in general, but eventually it does devolve into like open world games. And I just wanted to react to it. It's a very, how do you say, charged video. I did skip a bit into it because the first one is the primer, like hook to get you in. I'm not gonna play that because I just want to see it first time throughout the video, and also it's gonna be repeatable, so I don't want that. And also, I did speed this up to 1.25 times. It is a near hour video, and just to speed up the pace a bit more, I will be skipping some bits if I think it's necessary. So yeah, let's go right on to it.
The gaming industry is desperately trying to settle.
Also, additionally, just let me quickly say that if you do want to watch the video on your own, it will be in the description below. So, yeah.
On like a new money-making guaranteed formula, now that all the ones that they've been relying on don't work. Like, I've been watching, I just watched these the other day. The zero punctuation guy, expert punctuation, Yahtzee Croshaw, he was talking about this, and I think he was totally right. Like, all the big AAA games that are coming out these days cost $8 trillion to make, and they require 2 years of crunch time, and half of the developers commit ritualistic suicide along the development process. And then they finally release the game. Do you guys, okay, real talk, I'm not talking about how high quality the game is. Have you noticed how basically nobody seems to give a shit about God of War Ragnarok? But back in God of, like, 2018,
So, the first point that he's trying to make, or at least from my understanding of the charitable take, is that he's trying to say that in comparison to games like Elden Ring, God of War Ragnarok, it doesn't really have that much impact culturally or in the communities. Now, I don't really agree with that. I do think God of War Ragnarok does have a lot of impact on it. Same with the first 2016 God of War. And I don't necessarily see how relevant this is, because it's inherently saying that how good something is depends on how much people talk about it, which I don't necessarily think is relevant to that, because there are a bunch of indie games that are really good and no one really talks about them. Does that mean those indie games are bad? Not necessarily. It just means that they're not that popular and they don't really get talked about. Again, it's a weird argument that he gets to make, which I just don't get.
God of War 2018 was fucking amazing and everyone talked about it. Like, Ragnarok might be as good of a game, but you can't deny there's a massive downgrade in how much people are talking about it. And you know why? The reason why is that because in the 4 years in between God of War 2018 and God of War Ragnarok, we saw 80 million games that were just like God of War 2018.
Which, again, I don't necessarily think means much of anything. Just because there are a lot of games similar to God of War Ragnarok does not necessarily mean that God of War Ragnarok is bad because of it, or it's bad that there are a lot of games similar to God of War Ragnarok. It's just a thing. And if you dislike that, that's certainly fine. I'm not contending the point that he should like it. I'm just necessarily saying that argument doesn't really mean much. You know, it's just like, well, I dislike this thing that exists. Okay, sure.
That is to say, games where, like, they try to elevate the formula of like a highly linear, narrative, character-driven, like you walk along a line and your characters talk all the time and you get from point A to point B and blah blah. It's like all video games feel the same now, and all AAA games have basically the same beats that like hit behind the scenes, like beat, 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 beat. So even if they're really, really good, it's not interesting. This is why I can't play the Uncharted games. It's because...
Which, again, is another argument I don't really get. Again, if Vaush's, from my understanding, opinion on how good something is if it's interesting. Now, I'm not necessarily sure what makes something interesting to him. It's, from my understanding at least, something that uses the mechanics in the game in a compelling manner. You know, something different, or in a very well executed manner, or whatever. And yeah, I mean, that's fine. I don't necessarily agree with that. My opinion more is that I think a game is good if it is executed really well, and even if it is done. Even if the game that is being done has been done before a lot of times, I don't necessarily think that's relevant to it. It's still a good game in my opinion. I mean, I personally like that there are a lot of those games, but I still think it's a good game.
Because, like, when you're playing an Uncharted game, or probably even The Last of Us, which I've never played, but I've seen playthroughs, I feel like you know everything that's going to happen, just because, like, these games are basically just books. Why do you think The Last of Us is doing so well as a TV show? The gameplay doesn't really serve.
Now, that necessarily saying that's also like unexpected. Like, I'm not necessarily sure if saying that things have to be unexpected, or you have to like sort of there has to be more than just what you think there's going to be. Which again, I don't really think is bad per se, but yeah.
the narrative. The narrative happens, and the narrative's good, but like the gameplay's just like, well, this is the part where there's going to be a fighting set piece, and like here's the part with the stealth action, and here's the part where you have to search the large area for the crafting materials. You're never you may be surprised on narrative beats, but on a gameplay beat, like everything is incredibly formulaic. You'll never be surprised. Which means that it shouldn't be a game; it should be a TV show. If the part of
Now, that's necessarily I have a very big contention with. Just because the gameplay mechanics are very simple in that, I don't necessarily think it's bad because of that, nor does it not deserve to be a game. To me, I think, and what I like about gameplay is that I feel like stories and narratives should inform the gameplay. Even if it is very simple and whatnot, I don't necessarily think that's bad. Because to me, I love when the narrative and the story of the world informs how the gameplay will act, and to me that's just really great. Uncharted is take the very essence of like an Indiana Jones films and turn it into a game playable thing, which Vaush seems he doesn't really like, but to me I love that type of stuff. I played all the Uncharted games and I love it. There are some issues gameplay wise with Uncharted 1. It is very bad, very poor, but Uncharted 4 has improved so massively on it that I think it really gives you the sense of an Indiana Jones game, but you're actually playing it. And to me, I value that. He obviously doesn't value that, and there's no real way to argue against that. I can't really argue him into saying, okay, I like the Uncharted games. The only thing you can actually say is like, okay, I'm going to stand other people like it, but I don't like it. And again, I don't think though the thing he did say that is, I think, can be argued against is that the Uncharted games and Last of Us games shouldn't be games, they should be movies or books, which I disagree with. I don't really think that means much, because to me, them being games also enhances the feeling, because when you play them, you being able to interact with elements and you moving forward gives a sort of new dynamic that just watching something doesn't really give.
the media that isn't interesting is the game part, then it probably shouldn't be a game. And look how well the TV show's doing, you know? So yeah, I don't know.
Which also, I don't really think that, oh, look how well the TV show is doing just because it isn't a game. That doesn't really mean much of anything to me. It's a good story, and it's adapted really well, okay? I don't necessarily think that means the game shouldn't be a game.
And like the open world games aren't doing as well lately. Guys, do you remember Horizon Zero Dawn West or whatever? Who even played that game? Abysmal take that the gameplay in those is bad. No. Braves 136. Listen again, and I'm not going to patronize because I want you to really pay attention. Okay, you're like the special needs student in the back, but I believe in you and I want you to go far. All right. I didn't say the gameplay was bad. I said it was predictable and doesn't serve the narrative. So, I know that there's.
Now, I don't necessarily know what he means doesn't serve the narrative, because Uncharted is supposed to have this Indiana Jones vibe. Indiana Jones, and when can you turn that into a gameplay? Well, Indiana Jones has shooting, it has climbing, it has puzzles and whatnot, and you can turn those into gameplay elements, right? And so in that way, it does serve the narrative. So I don't necessarily know what he means that it doesn't deserve to be a game, because the gameplay doesn't serve the narrative. Because it technically does serve the narrative, you know?
There's like competent shooting in Uncharted 2 or whatever, especially like in the remake, because they made it so that your aim doesn't lock back to center whenever you pop up from cover. However, it's predictable. And like, don't you all know when you're playing a game like that and you're about to get an action set piece? Like, don't you all know, like, you're walking with your NPC support character and you're both talking, and then you enter a suspiciously large room where nobody's talking and nothing is visible, but there are a bunch of like chest-high walls and cover areas and stuff, and it's like, okay, like, obviously as soon as I take a few more steps forward, like, it's like someone's gonna go like Allahu Akbar from a far corner of the room, and then there's gonna be shooting. And this.
Now, I do agree with him on saying that they probably shouldn't make the fighting sections that overt and obvious and whatnot. But I do think there is an argument to say that why it should be a bit obvious is because so you can at least have the player mentally ready for the next challenge and whatnot. It's a sacrifice in a sort of level design and story sense, so that the gameplay feels a bit better to play, right? Like, for example, he obviously likes the Dark Souls series, and the Dark Souls quite clearly tells you when a boss is happening. And when they do that, it's like, okay, so you're mentally prepared to take on the boss, right? But obviously, Dark Souls is a bit different because it's solely gameplay focused. I don't really think you need like the lore or anything really other than just the gameplay of Dark Souls. And it will be fine because its sole focus is the gameplay. While Uncharted is different because its sole focus is the narrative with stuff added onto it to enhance that. Which, again, a difference of opinion. There's no real way to argue out of it. But again, I don't really think it's a good argument what he said, of like it doesn't really inform the narrative, but it technically does because the narrative is a sort of Indiana Jones style thing.
The support character is going to say, "Damn," and you're going to say, "Huh, guess it's time to go shooting again." And then like you do the action set piece, and then a helicopter shows up because it's always a helicopter, and then you kill all the guys, and you get and then at the end of it, it's like, and then the NPC support character is like, "Damn, you sure shot him again." Like we've all played this, we all know this. It's the same in The Last of Us. Not to take away from the narrative, like I've only
like again, I don't really think that's like it's obviously a difference of opinion, right? But like I just don't agree fundamentally because to me I don't really feel bored when I play the Uncharted series, right? I don't like when I play the gameplay, right? I didn't really feel like, oh yeah, I'm playing the same game over and over again. Or if I play games that came after Uncharted, I don't feel like I'm playing the same game over and over again. I'm just playing a game that has that action because it makes sense within that sort of setting, right? Like, to me, I like it when games have this setting and lore and story and narratives inform the gameplay and whatnot. And to me, Uncharted does that. And when I look into games like that, it's, to me at least, oh, that just makes sense, right? It's not supposed to be trying anything new because it's not coming from a gameplay side, it's coming from a narrative side, a lore side, a setting side. And to me, that's fine.
Watched gameplay of the God of War games, but I feel like, are people playing those games for the gameplay? Because when I watch people play those games, I feel like 99% of the time people are like soying out over how cool the story is and the character beats and the dialogue. And it seems like for a lot of people, the gameplay itself is like, not to say it's bad, it seems pretty competently executed in God of War. Like, they put a lot of effort into it. But, like, the main thing that drives it forward is, like, the really cool interactions between,
And this is I do agree with this. Like, I'm not a guy who plays games. Okay, I should rephrase this. I'm a person who does play for gameplay, but again, as I said repeatedly now, I play games for its stories, but I like its gameplay when it's informed by its lore, narrative, and setting, right? To me, that feels a lot more better. I don't necessarily like when gameplay informs the narrative, lore, and story, because to me that feels like it's fake, essentially. I don't really like that, but I like it when it comes from the other direction, And to me, God of War really does that, Obviously, when you take into account the first God of War games, that's not really true. They obviously did say, like, okay, so you know what would be cool? Really awesome combos with just so much bloodshed. And then they came up with, like, okay, we should probably make this a sort of like a Greek story, Greek stories are a bit violent. Yeah, Greek stories are a bit violent. And so they came up with that idea, right? Again, difference opinion. So I also will be increasing the speed because I've realized this is a lot slower than what I thought it would be.
Kratos and Atreides and like the guy, Mimir, the eyeball guy, the like head lantern guy, I guess in that case there's like enough for everyone. I guess I'm just really bored of the cover shooting like stealth stuff. The Last of Us 2 really was good gameplay, just outshined by the Master Sword. Well, that's the thing. If gameplay's really predictable to me, it stops being good or interesting. It's kind of like everything gets added on top of itself in a way that you're just old. No, it.
Again, I think Colin Mold is also a very bad argument, but I just want to address the first one, which is, again, like, I can understand what he means by that. If I've eaten the same pizza like 20 times, right, for 20 days, I'll obviously get bored of it and tired of it eventually. But for me, right, I don't necessarily play games that often, so in my context, I don't necessarily experience that. But also, I don't necessarily think that means you have to call it bad or whatever. I just think it's something that you're not into,
It's not that I'm old. It's just like every game has to be everything now. You know what I mean? It's like
this I do agree with though. A lot of games, and mostly Ubisoft games, he's going to mention that eventually, do feel like they're trying to do a lot of things without, not necessarily doing they do some of them really great, but they don't do, but there's, okay, so it's like this. You have a huge amount of things, right? Like 50 things, right? And like 20 of those things are really good. 20 of those parts are really good. But you could have just had like 30 of those things and had like 30 good things instead of 50, which is now the majority, 30 things which aren't really that well done. And that's what a lot of Ubisoft games feel like. There's a lot of good in them, but there's also a lot more bad in them,
A AAA disease, kind of. It's like how like people will say a game is a shooter these days, but no, it's not. Like Doom is a shooter, the original Doom, because all you do is shoot. You don't even talk. There's not even a fucking story, basically. You just shoot. And then we keep adding stuff onto that. And it's like, okay, well, we'll have that, but we'll have like persistent gameplay, story, dialogue, characters. We'll have like this like cutscene, action, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, that's all good. It's not bad to have those things. But we are adding on to a basic element of the formula. And then you take a look at a game like The Last of Us 2, and it's like, okay, well, we need to have like basically everything people play because we're like.
From my understanding of Last of Us 2, I don't really remember it having like everything. It had some like crafting systems, but that was in the first one as well, and those systems normally emphasize the sort of scavenger mentality that the whole world being collapsed and whatnot, that you root around, and it is supposed to get you the sense of like, okay, you're going around finding all these bits and parts and whatnot, and you're doing this because there's no like stable source of it, you know, versus like Call of Duty where you where your ammo isn't limited. You don't have to look for ammo. You just are given ammo, and you can just pick off the ground. It's an unlimited source, right? It's supposed to give this different feeling. While The Last of Us and all these crafting stuff is supposed to give this sense of like you're rooting around and you're a real scavenger type of thing.
Spending $5 billion in this game. So let's do, okay, we have to do the stealth, the combat, we have to do the quippy dialogue, we have to do the hard-hitting, like emotionally driven narrative.
Oh, and also like the stealth combat as well. Like again, for me, those things don't really mean they're very bad for me, because in story it makes sense for the characters and for you, the player, to do that because of the context given of the world.
Pieces we have to do like the crafting and the open world segments, but not too much open world, because if you let people run around and like dick about for too long, it doesn't matter as much. You know, yeah, like the pseudo RPG elements. You have to do this, you have to do that. It's like, yeah. What about the new Doom games? The new Doom games are great. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying like, man, the fuck that every game has crafting systems and RPG elements nowadays, though, is so fucking annoying. That actually does trigger the fuck out of me. That does genuinely fucking bother me. I do hate that a lot. I really do hate that. It takes away from so many games, man. Because like, if you think about it, like, fuck, I shouldn't be doing this early. God damn it. It's gonna be a long stream today, guys. Just understand that. Okay, here's a chart. Okay, Vaush, how the hell are you tired of story-driven games? Because you never get tired of From Software making literally the same game 8 times. Well, that's the thing, Salty Internet Pirate. Leaving aside the fact that there are subtle differences between the Souls-like games, those games are gameplay-driven. You know, like lore and narrative are fun and interesting and all, but ultimately they're gameplay challenges. And they've succeeded, for the most part, I think, in keeping that gameplay challenge interesting and novel. I may know the basic beats of a Dark Souls game narratively, but I'm not playing it for the narrative. I'm playing it for the specifics of the very nuanced gameplay. And
yeah, and that's why, for me at least personally, I can't really get into From Software games, because I don't really because to me personally, I feel very aimless when I play those games. I don't really feel like I have any solid direction. It's just like, oh yeah, just kill some dudes, right? It's like, okay, anything else? Anything else? No? Okay, sure, whatever. And to me, this is a very big difference in why I disagree with a lot of this video, is because it feels like it's not talking about the other side. And he does talk about it a lot in the first part of the video, and I do agree with him a lot on what he says. It's just, I think there's something missing here.
Like the gameplay in a Souls-like game is refined enough that even if I know I'm about to fight like the big king who fell, you know, the specific attack patterns that he has can be like, if they're different than what I expect, like that to me is enough, right? Whereas like the like Last of Us 2 shooting gallery set piece or the Uncharted shooting gallery set piece, like they all feel the same no matter what. I've played enough of those. You can't tell me that those don't feel samey. Like I know they do, because it's like the same thing. It's like you run, you hide, you shoot. Like, okay, I know how these gameplay loops work. Whereas in like, you know, a Souls boss fight, like there's a really fun specific challenge of overcoming in a very direct combat arena one guy or maybe two, you know, depending on the fight. But I do kind of dislike parts of Elden Ring.
When he gets into that, I just want to say that again, I really disagree with that. Again, I don't really see the issues with those games feeling the same, because to me, again, it makes sense for them to be the way that they are, right? Again, I'm coming from a different side than what Vaush seems to be coming from.
Because Elden Ring does get repetitive, especially in its replays. And a lot of it is because of its fucking open world crafting system. And I've never liked the RPG systems in the Dark Souls games, by the way. You want consistency? I've always felt like the Souls games shouldn't actually have level ups. Because I've always felt like if the ultimate point of the game is to overcome a challenge through your skill and skill alone, going back and leveling like up to make it easier, I don't like that as an option.
Now, I haven't really played it, but you know, I've watched a couple of essays, I think totaling into like 10 hours and whatnot, so I think I have something to say at least. Again, I think the Dark Souls series are a lot of things to a lot of different people, but why I think Miyazaki and From Software keeps having the leveling system and crafting elements is because they want the player to sort of, how do you say, meet the challenge how they want to face it, right? Because essentially Dark Souls does have an easy mode, but the easy mode is just the leveling system and how much you're willing to grind and whatnot. And if you're willing to grind a lot, then yeah, Dark Souls becomes a lot easier. If you're willing to exploit bosses, then it becomes easier. The designers of the game allowed you to do all of those stuff because, you know, they wanted you to overcome it, you know, in the way that you wanted to. And it obviously does bring issues in terms of like the melee combat system. Magic is very overpowered because the bosses don't really know how to react to that, and if they do know how to react to that, it makes ranged builds a lot harder and forces magic builds into engaging, which again has some issues there as well. But again, I think he's not wrong in how it affects stuff like that, but I don't necessarily think that's what the intent from software is.
If we're focusing on like the pure, like distilled challenge of the combat experience, I think there should be ways to choose character builds that don't actually like allocate power to your character. But that's a personal preference. That's not like me doing a huge criticism. Look, the thing that I'm trying to say about like crafting RPG elements, all right, is like, okay, super quick, all right. Modern AAA games have an unbelievable amount of time and effort put into them, okay? And this is something that really bugs me, okay? Let's say that, like, there is like, you start at point A. Why did I do X for A? You start at point A, and you want to get over here to point B, okay? Now, ultimately, the point of a video game is to entertain you and to, like, get a good cost-to-entertainment ratio for the time that you spend on it. Like, we're talking a AAA game. They can't release a game that costs $60, took $200 million to make, and it plays for 4 hours, right? Like, the goal here is, of course, they want to pad and stretch to an extent. That's fine. Not all padding is necessarily bad, Like, this is why not all games are boss rush games. Even if a game has, like, 8 bosses, and the bosses are the coolest parts, it's okay to have, like, mook enemies between them, so you chain together the fights and get like a good like difficulty wave, like you want peaks of difficulty, but you want relaxation too. Video games shouldn't be like 10 out of 10 excitement all the time because you get burnt out. This is why Fury is a boss rush game, but every boss fight is punctuated with 3 minutes of walking down like an upside down floating prison wall while a guy in a bunny costume tells you how high he is, like you have like a huge fight and it's really difficult, but then it's like, okay, let's chill out for a little bit, and then you like fight again, okay? So let's say that you have like, you gotta go from point A to point B, okay? And the problem that I have is that like it used to be, and by used to be, what I mean is like even like Call of Duty, okay? I'm not like reaching high here. I'm not like reaching for the stars, okay? But it used to be like if you were gonna chain together these points, you had to have like stuff to engage the player through them. You know what I mean? So like maybe you have some like easy guys to take out here, and then like over here there's like a little crate you can find with some ammo, and then over here there's like a group of guys that you can that actually kind of like a tough fight if you don't like ambush them or like you throw a grenade or whatever. And like it holds your attention. But the thing that I despise and the thing that I'm so fucking tired of, the thing that I'm so fucking exhausted of, I can't stand it. Like it actually fucking hurts. Like it hurts my chest when I see it now, and I see it all the time when I play games. Is this okay? Where you'll have like that same kind of like path from A to B, okay? But then, oh hey, the game's being really generous. At a point in between A and B, or possibly during all of it, okay? It's not actually a linear path. It's actually a kind of semi-open world, but not really corridor, that is peppered with fucking crafting items.
Now, I think the issue with that as well is because a lot of open world games don't necessarily utilize those systems well, and they don't really do it with intent, right? They just add them because, not because there's anything interesting that you can add in them. A game I love a lot, Dragon Age Inquisition, has a lot of these elements where it feels like they're not really that useful, and it feels like they could have been trimmed down. So they can still retain the same effect, it's just that it wouldn't have been as tedious or as long to engage with those mechanics, And I agree with him on that fact, but the way he makes his point makes it seem like he doesn't wish it to exist anymore. He does like hyperbolically say, I think later in the video, that open world games should be dead forever. And obviously I don't think he means that seriously. I just think he means that in a, like, he wants them to, he wants open world games to slow down. He wants the release of open world games to be little, so that other different games can exist and whatnot, which I don't necessarily mind. More games should exist,
I am so tired because now they're like, dude, we don't even have to structure out like a bunch of combat beats. The players will get little bits of satisfaction every time they come across a consumable because it's like a little Skinner box reward that you have to run around picking up, and you have to like grind your nose against the wall so you don't miss out on any green herbs or whatever. And then it's like, and like maybe there's like a fight right here or something. And like, okay, but like overwhelmingly, it's like, yeah. And then like depending on the game, it's either really, so like one issue here is like Horizon Zero Dawn, where it's like a lot of this is just tedious bullshit, And then sometimes it's like The Last of Us 2 or Resident Evil, where it's like, okay, it's not tedious, but you do have to grind your nose against every edge of the map because like these games run you up pretty hard against your like crafting and ammunition limits, and you need to get every single one of those,
I do think Resident Evil is different here because Resident Evil is a survivalist horror, and that's the intent of the game, so it makes sense for Resident Evil to do that and whatnot. Again, for The Last of Us, I think is also important because it's not a survivalist in the pure sense, but it is pulling survivalist elements because it also wants to use those elements to sort of emphasize the state of the world,
You know what I mean? Bro, you're literally long. You're literally talking about game design. This shit works and is used for a reason. Jesus Christ. Yeah, it's used for a reason. It's used to keep hamster-brained retards like you on your fucking treadmill. You're right. It is used for a reason. It maximizes profits for the bourgeoisie. But yeah, you're like defending the food pellet that you're chasing while the ground underneath you turns under like behind you at the same speed as your movement. No, this is shit. This is dog shit. You suck. I can tolerate it for shit like Resident Evil 4 or whatever, because for the most part, like, it's pretty easy to see stuff, you know? Like, the items glow, and, you know, sometimes there's hidden stuff that can be fun to find, because it's like a little challenge to find it. But sometimes, man, you're literally just like, okay, pick up, pick up, pick up, pick up. At least in Elden Ring, like...
Which I do agree that it is a big issue. For me, Horizon Zero Dawn, the interesting parts for me, at least, or the parts that I liked a lot and kept wanting to do more of, is the story sections, the combat, and the how do you say the systems with the dinosaur robots. I don't know the name. I can't remember. But the removing those components and the progression to you struggling to you overcoming them very easily, to me at least, is very satisfying. I like that sort of combat and whatnot. But what I didn't really like was collecting a lot of useless stuff. I remember when I opened up my map for Horizon Zero Dawn at the end of the game, I was like, that's a lot of fucking stuff. Oh boy, that's a lot of stuff. Oh boy. And I didn't really like it because it felt like I wasn't really doing anything meaningful to me, at least. And I do agree with that I feel like Horizon Zero Dawn could have been very streamlined and could have essentially been the first area, then the second area, which is transitioning into the desert place, and then those desert places can like send you off, the desert city can send you off into different directions, right? And so you can then at least have a more focused on the gameplay, the story, and it can feel a lot more, not easier, a little more enjoyable to run through, because I don't really feel like I want to play Horizon Zero Dawn again because of how big it is, you know? And that's the same thing for a lot of open worlds. Like, I love Mass Effect Andromeda and Dragon Age Inquisition, a very highly contentious opinion, but I struggled playing those games because of the open world, and I feel like if it was more streamlined, it would have been a lot more easier for me to enjoy the parts that I actually do enjoy.
Crafting is totally unnecessary. There's no reason to use crafting if you don't need to, because it's honestly kind of a superfluous and underdeveloped system. But like, oh my god, man. Dude. Is nobody else tired of this? Do you think it's part of solving critical thinking? No, it's just padding. It's literally just... No, the developers are just going, how do we string along a narrative sequence in a way that keeps...
Also, I do want to say, I do think there are some people who do enjoy this, and if they do enjoy that, that's certainly fine. I just don't get it. I don't like doing those type of stuff, because to me, I'm not a big fan of things that don't really matter to what the game is trying to do, you know, or what I want the game to do, you know.
People engage from A to B while getting like good returns on our investment. Oh, well, rather than like structuring well thought out combat sequences that keep a good like flow of difficulty, challenge, and tension, instead, what if we just like filled everything with like crafting RPG elements, so everyone's always looking for like the little XP things or the little herbs or this, that, the other. Insanity, how this makes you mad, but you're still a Souls fan. What? In Dark Souls, first of all, in Dark Souls, there was no crafting until Elden Ring, and second of all, the items in Dark Souls are totally not necessary to the gameplay experience. Like picking up consumables or whatever. Also, keep in mind that in Dark Souls, once you pick up an item, you've picked it up, and you'll often go through these areas multiple times. One of the nice things about Dark Souls is that, like, because you die over and over again on the bonfire run to get to the boss, you usually run through what is pretty short of an area, like, pretty quick, and there's usually not that much stuff along the way. The games are relatively well structured in the sense that, like, you make it a little bit further each time, and you find one or two more items. Also, Dark Souls very deliberately doesn't have any inventory limits. It didn't have crafting until Elden Ring, and a lot of the stuff that you found is just, like, a different type of sword. Hopium, it's totally different. I don't know if you got... Maybe you guys just don't play video games.
I do disagree with the guy who just said that. I'm gonna find out who said that. But to me, right, I think it's important to have a game be intentional in how it wants to develop its stuff, especially because on how do you say how it makes the game feel a lot more better, you know. But also just to say, quickly go back to that because I rambled off. The guy who said that, you know, that it's basically the same, I don't really think they know what Dark Souls is about. Dark Souls doesn't have crafting items, from my understanding, right? And Vaush is completely right on this one. And to me, at least, it's a misunderstanding of what Dark Souls is doing. You know, there are items you can consume and buy. Like in Dark Souls 2, there are these like life gems and whatnot. I think there are some stuff in Dark Souls 1 that you can buy, like throwable items and whatnot. But like that's a completely different system that's not crafting something. That's just buying something. It's just like, oh yeah, I bought an item from a merchant, which like gives me increased stats for a bit. Okay, that's not crafting. That's just using the game's existing mechanics, which is spending souls to unlock other things, to improve your character. It's completely in line with it, not crafting. And Elden Ring's crafting, at least from my understanding, isn't relevant either, because Elden Ring's crafting is like, you can improve your stats if you want to, but you don't have to.
You don't actually know what it is I'm referring to. Like, much in the same way that I can say, hey guys, wouldn't it be cool if X game existed? And you're all like, oh, of course, exactly, like Skyrim. Maybe I'm saying, like, I don't like it when gameplay developers, like, pace out their games with these stupid...
I do agree with him on some of his video game ideas. I do think they're cool, and it is weird that a lot of his chat is misunderstanding him, what he's trying to say, It feels very weird to just see people, like, not understand what he's trying to say, and also not to be able to understand what he's trying to say. Like, yeah, I mean, like, that would be a cool game idea, right? Like,
unnecessary RPG crafting item gathering time waste, and you guys are like, but here's another game where crafting items are okay, but you don't know the difference because you're infants and you haven't played video games and you don't know the difference. Oh my god. Somebody in chat, at least a few people understand what I'm talking about. What's the alternative that doesn't create a boring on-rails experience? Basically, every game before, like, 2000 and, I don't know, what, 14? Didn't have this issue. This is a modern thing. Games have gotten more and more expensive, and now all of them have crafting RPG elements. This was not a problem for the majority of the existence of the medium. If you go back and play, like, really good narrative games or really good semi-linear games from basically any previous era, go back to the Nintendo 64, go back to the PS1, the PS2, go back to the Xbox, all this shit. It's like, oh, wow, all of a sudden now, we are once again playing in a game where we just played Halo. Halo isn't chalked up with a bunch of bullshit crafting. Oh, you found the one. Like, ammo's pretty easy to find. You're going from fighting set piece to fighting set piece. And, like, man, that's what you're here to do. You're here to fight. Fighting is the point of the Halo game. You're fighting. That's the point of Halo. Not, like, gathering pieces of, like, ceramite armor on the ground so that when I get 87 of them, I can upgrade my armor against plasma.
And again, I do agree with this one as well. I do think it is a bit of an issue with, like, and I don't think it's the developers who are trying to do this, but I do think it is, like, as you said before, the incentive to make the, $60 worth something, right? And to pad out, which I don't really think is necessary, Open games, before this trend was really big, was still cost $60, right? And they were, at the time, like 20 to like 30 hours, right? And I'm satisfied with that. I love, like, again, I'm a Bio fan, if you probably couldn't tell by this point, that I love Mass Effect 1, 2, 3, Dragon Age Origins, and 2, because they're not like quick games, but they're games I can feel like I'm digesting and progressing every day I play, right? Even if it's a small bit, and I absolutely love that feeling, Dragon Age 2 is my favorite game of all time, and that game, like, takes, I think, like literally 30 hours to complete fully, right? And that's a very small experience, but I love Dragon Age 2 so much, It is such a well-crafted, well done game. There are issues with it, like reused level assets and whatnot, but I still love it so much for this sense of, like, I can play it without feeling like I'm going to spend an eternity trying to play it, I love it so much,
Taxed by 8%, And then Halo Infinite happened. And then Halo Infinite happened, right? GTA hasn't done this, for example. Yeah, well, GTA is still open world. And all open world games are bad. So, must skill / gameplay factors. Just play chess, Vaush. You clearly don't actually enjoy video games. That's bait. Vaush, games are better when you make your own story and not follow a dull story. Okay, then make your own story of, like, play Breath of the Wild and just roll off a cliff over and over and over again until you die of old age. What the f are you talking about? You're paying money for a product! Go play Minecraft! What did you think of Metro Exodus and its open world? There were parts of Metro Exodus' open world that kind of tried me. Not gonna lie. Was Metro Exodus really, like, that much better than the previous two games for its open world? I would say no. I don't think it improved on it. The open world, guys, a huge part of the popularity of the open world has been a way to force more effort on the side of the level development and, like, art asset teams without requiring much communication from or cooperation with the like, writing and game design teams, okay? Like, if you...
I don't necessarily think that is true. I do think there is still some, like, effort from the writing team and whatnot to, how do you say... establish some, like, consistency and whatnot, but I think it's a lot of open world games don't really take that approach, because what they're taking the approach is just like a big level, but not like anything else, right? Again, I do agree with, like, his point broadly, but I don't necessarily think that's, like, happening like all the time, or that happens most of the time,
you have a well-structured linear game, that means that everything that the player encounters has to be like a synchronous experience with regards to every element of the game, from story, like dialogue, like the art, everything has to come together. Whereas in an open world, right, like basically the team can just go, yeah, like we're gonna like do this part of the story in like a big snow map. So just make like a big snow map, and if you could like do a town here, a river here, train crossing here, do this, that, yeah, build all that, and like we'll like fill in basically, because it's now desynchronous. You can walk around and experience stuff in any order up until you get to like the area where the story progresses.
I do think there are some good things that open world games do, but like what open world games generally like are good at least for me, right, is that they're good at allowing the player to decide where they wish to go, right? A very, not a pseudo one, but like not even I think trying to emulate one, but like Fallout 1 had something similar, not exactly. I don't want to say it is the same, but like you could go anywhere within Fallout 1, and the point of that was to give you a sense of danger, feeling loss, and not really knowing where everything is, you know. In Fallout 1, it's this emotion of the world has collapsed utterly, and you don't know what's going on, right? You eventually find civilization and whatnot, but there's so many parts of the open world that are just empty, that feels like this used to be something. This used to be something more than just crags and radiated wastes, you know. And that feeling is very emphasized in that, and I think it's very appropriate in that use. And I think same some of the Fallout games, I think Fallout 3 to some extent has this feeling of like the world has been destroyed utterly, and you and a few other people are the only ones that are left, right? You look upon the works of the old world and just see them in heaps and ash, right? And it's supposed to invoke that sense of like I think nostalgia, and additionally like dread, you know, that all of this was gone in an instant. And I think that's very good in how open worlds can be used. But also, open worlds are, in my opinion, a lot of times bad because they desynchronize between the story and the gameplay, right? Open worlds are inherently non-linear, and the player gets to decide where they want to go in any direction. And because of that, it makes the gameplay and story a lot harder to craft unless the story and gameplay are supposed to explore the open world. I think Elden Ring, to a certain extent, does this really well, because Elden Ring encourages the player to go out in the open world and explore, because Elden Ring says, hey, this boss, it's a bit difficult, it's a bit hard, you know, you can go out in the open world and do whatever, right? There's no pressure from the story, right? The world has been in shit for a long time, it's still gonna be shit right off to you, so like, do whatever, you know? While other games like The Witcher 3, for example, has a sense of like, okay, you need to get Ciri, right? Ciri's like, well, the first is, you need to get Yennefer. You don't know where Yennefer is. She could be in danger. Go get her. But then Geralt can go like, oh yeah, sorry, Vesemir, I have to like do something else, right? And then when you, in White Orchard, get attacked by the Griffin, it's like, okay, Vesemir says, okay, Geralt, we need to save this town, okay? The Griffin can attack at any moment. Quickly get the stuff. And then you can just spend like 5 hours doing literally everything else other than the Griffin thing. It's like, okay, cool, nice, alrighty then. The Griffin could have attacked at any point of those times, but okay. It ruins the pacing a lot of the times, you know. And good paced open worlds are games that say, the story doesn't need to be done immediately, and the gameplay loop has the open world included into it, you know.
Progresses, in which case things get good again all of a sudden, crazily enough. But it's like a lot of padding, right? Like, is the gameplay experience really made that much better? Because like, okay, so like before it was like, oh, we can have like a crafted experience in this area that goes on for 2 hours, or we can have it go on for 8 hours, and 6 of those 8 hours are driving around in your buggy car, like collecting meaningless bullshit all around here until finally you arrive at the story zone that makes the story go forward. But you can't skip all this bullshit because it contains the ammunition and the weapons and the EXP and all that bullshit that you're going to need to do this area, otherwise the game will get progressively harder. Wow, now we've made 2 hours into 8 hours. Give examples. I am specifically referring to Metro Exodus here. Piss poor argument. You guys are insane. You're insane. You're all urinals. Your stomachs are being used by urinals, by greasy game developers who are trying to make more money off of their exploitative business practices. And you're like begging for more because you mentally ill, degenerate, are so starved for entertainment that you will literally play an uninteresting, dull 40-hour experience and think, wow, at least that distracted me from my suicidal thoughts for a little while longer than a good game would have. You, all of you, you're ruining the medium. I wish all of you would just stop buying video games and play Minecraft so you can leave actual interesting experiences to people who give a shit about the medium instead of going, who cares if they're padding? I like the interesting gameplay. I want to numb my brain. I play games exclusively so I can listen to podcasts and play on my phone while I'm playing the game like I know you people do, because all of you people are ADHD-riddled Zoomers, and you can't entertain yourselves with just one product, and you would rather satisfy yourself with 3 mediocre ones at the same time. I hate you.
Now, obviously, I do disagree with his broad point, because his point is basically saying that he doesn't wish these games to overtake the medium, and I do agree with that. I don't want any one singular genre or gameplay type to overtake the genre, right? I don't want that to happen. I didn't like it when Bioware-style games were a lot more dominant when like Mass Effect released. I didn't think that was a good idea. Nor do I think it is good for the opposite of that to happen. I want a variety of different games to exist as well. But again, if you do like these games, whatever, right? I'm not playing them. I'm certainly not playing them. I just want more games that aren't like that, you know?
Hey, I'm awake now. There we go. All right, well, hopefully someone agrees with me. Congrats, Vaush. You managed to make your media arguments peak retarded today. You people suck. You're exactly the fucking... I don't know how I can go on Twitter and find a bunch of people eye-rolling that the new Suicide Squad game is going to be a live service action game.
I do agree with him broadly again, that on his media takes, right, that broadly on them, but I do think the way he conveys it is very confrontational and sort of makes people not want to really engage with his arguments, you know, because when anyone hears anyone say stuff like that, right, you don't really want to listen to them. Why? Are the arguments back? No, it's just because they sound like an ass, you know. Like, why do you want to listen to someone like that? You have better things to do, don't you? You know? But that's obviously with a in-person reaction. I think online it's a bit more permissible, because there's at least something to say that there's a lot more of a jovial attitude towards it. But again, I do think his media takes are fine, but it is very hard to agree with him when he is very confrontational. Also, the Suicide Squad being like a live service game, I didn't hear that before. I think that's bad, right? Again, I don't like all of these like live service games either. You know, it feels, at least to me as well, like subconsciously, I want the game that I buy, like, because I want to buy a game on disc and be able to play it, right? I want to be able to do that, and whenever I want to do it, I can just put it in and I can play it like there. You know, I want to be able to have my games physically and digitally, and I can just play them whenever I want. You know, and to me that's really important. And live service games incentivize a different type of thing, because they don't, because if you buy the game on disc on a live service game, even if you can play it offline, right, that's not the final game, you know, it's a buggy miss. Anyone who bought like Cyberpunk 2077 when it released, right, and didn't get any of the patches has a buggy game, you know. If you don't have an internet connection, you have a buggy game, right, and that's terrible, right, and that's awful, and I don't like that at all, you know.
And then you guys in my chat are like, live service? Like, I have to assume that all of you are totally okay with live service games, right? You're all totally okay with Destiny 2. You're all okay with the Gotham Knights. You're all okay with that shit. Because, like, clearly, like, the only thing you play video games for is to have developers piss down your throats. Oh, no, you don't. Oh, that's a step too far. So you're totally okay with game developers using random RPG and crafting elements to elongate a game in an uninteresting, unengaging manner. But you're not okay with them using Skinner box mechanics to do it. Is that right? So we're okay with one kind of bullshit, correct? Okay. You are no better than them. You are no better than them. You are the same. I agree with it hurts because I'm playing Shadow of War and enjoy. I haven't played Shadow of War. I've heard it's good, though. It's not unengaging, you idiot. Wandering around a big open world? Have you played, like, Horizon Zero Dawn? No, if anyone here can sincerely tell me that they played Horizon Zero Dawn or Horizon Zero West or whatever, and were engaged by just sort of waddling around the open world, like chest humping and jumping up on platforms to get one of the 87 billion fucking Ubisoft collectibles that are strewn across the map. Hey, guys, remember when Horizon Zero West came out and nobody cared? That was pretty funny, because a better game came out the same week, Elden Ring. That was pretty...
I don't think no one cared about it. I think a lot of people cared about it. I think a lot of people cared about, like, the story, the gameplay, and, like, the design of the world, right? Not necessarily the open world a lot. And there are some people who like it, and that's fine and whatnot. But I do think some people get it. Again, he's been very hyperbolic. I think if you do ask him, he says, "Oh, some people do care about it," you know. But yeah,
pretty cool. I like that. That made me happy when they spend a bunch of time and money. I lull myself to sleep with the YouTube videos of AI generated Horizon Zero West people sobbing into their pillows as they spend $8 trillion on a game that nobody played. Because I hate them. Like, I played Horizon Zero Dawn. Okay, here's your map, dog. Now let's sprinkle the Ubisoft bullshit. Can I like just get a larger dick? Hey guys, everyone, hey, doesn't your ADHD riddled Zoomer brain make you want to fill up the map? Don't you want to do all the things? You don't want to miss out on any cool collectibles. There won't actually be any cool collectibles, okay? All the stuff that you get is basically like really rote and uninteresting. But hey, like, wouldn't it be cool? Like, don't we now we have to check everything? Yes, unironically. Your brain is broken, and I hate you. I wish they made books for people like you because then at least satisfying your degenerate perversions would be less expensive, okay? I wish it's just a book that has 98 pages of build-up, one cool action scene, and then they just copy paste the 2 pages of action scene across so thick of a text you rival like the Harry Potter series, okay? So open world games need to die. Yes, Vaush doesn't like map exploration. That's it. He always wants to be engaged in useless, dull, repetitive content.
Which again, I do disagree with like the hyperbolic nature of it, you know. But that goes without being said.
Rather than finding or making new things to push you're defending map exploration as an alternative to useless, dull, repetitive content? If your game is so uninteresting that a direct engagement with the mechanics is dull and repetitive, and map exploration so you can find new things to push.
I think there is a game that can exist that does have like map exploration be the sole focus of it. But those games I think would be more artsy than I think a lot of people would be thinking they are. I don't think Horizon Zero Dawn can have like map exploration be the point of it, and still have like the cinematic nature of it, you know. A lot of those that idea that the commentator just said would be more of like, so you're exploring like lost ancient ruins and like you're just going from point to point, and the intrigue from the game is mostly you exploring these ruins and seeing what's happening. There's no like puzzles or whatever. It's just like you go to these locations and you use some sort of method to translate them or to identify them, and that's where the intrigue comes from. Not really the like gameplay part, you know, which I definitely think is fine, you know. Like I don't think this is the same game, but Firewatch does not something similar, but like it's not really about like having any combat or any real gameplay that feels warranted of a game, you know. It's just like you going around talking to a dude, and that's pretty much it, you know. That game is, I don't think, generally appealing because it's more focused and a bit more artsy, you know. At least to me.
Your characters, hey, if the map exploration was so fun, why the do you need the incentive to push your character's abilities, huh? If it's fun for its own sake, then why do they need to add the little Skinner box completionist bullshit to it, where it's like, oh, that dull repetitive content that you don't like? Well, they have to tie rewards to it because it's all part of the same brain exploitation system. I feel like I'm doing a screed on them putting like addictive chemicals into all the food we eat, and you guys are like, no, we like those addictive chemicals. It's good. We want literally everything to be full of trans fats. We want literally everything to be full of high fructose corn syrup. We don't care that it's killing us. It's good. We like it. We like it. We don't care. Vaush just likes superfluous bullshit when it's Japanese. No, I hated Persona 5. We literally just want healthcare, my dude. You don't deserve it. What are you gonna do with your longer life? Play Horizon Zero West? No, you. And free healthcare. Wait, dude, thanks to our $8 trillion healthcare spending, now people can get 100% in every Ubisoft game before they die. You. Will you play Baldur's Gate 3? If Baldur's Gate 3 was so good, they would make a Baldur's Gate 4. The whole argument comes down to Vaush being a hipster. I genuinely do hate you guys. I hate you. You have no idea how sincere the hatred is. It's veiled behind irony, but I do genuinely. I hate you. The game industry is literally imploding right now as they shut down live service game after live service game, and developers are.
I don't think it's imploding. I just think there are games that are not lasting, like live service games or whatnot. But that doesn't mean like the industry is imploding. That just means that those games aren't really online anymore, right? And even then, there are still like live service games that are still raking in tons of cash. Destiny 2 being one of them.
Are hanging themselves in their bedrooms for children to discover them on the crunch times that they're doing to build up these Cyberpunk 2077s, these Horizon Zero Wests, all these gigantic open world crafting RPG bullshit games. And you guys are, I am suicidal, so longer game times, the completion time, that's pretty much what I'm looking for here because it does distract me from my. So like, but quality doesn't matter because you're just looking for distraction. You're looking to numb your feelings. A lot of people just.
I did disagree with that one because he's implying that like open world games are less quality, or at least he's saying that it's not necessarily. Okay, he's not implying that. He's just necessarily saying that. How do you say this? What he's saying is that open world games aren't inherently bad, but they're these types of open world games are inherently bad. Essentially, is what I think he's trying to say, which I don't really agree with. Again, if you like these games with just tons of map icons and whatnot, sure, whatever, right? Whatever. I'm not gonna play them. I just don't necessarily think they should dominate the medium, you know.
Just play video games to numb themselves. And I know this because League of Legends is still a popular video game, okay? I know you motherfuckers are not playing League of Legends for like a novel, innovative gameplay experience. I know you're not engaging. The whole point of art is to like experience emotion, right? Like the whole point of art is to force you to confront elements of your psyche and of the emotional experience that you couldn't just like sitting alone sucking on your thumb.
Now I do disagree with his definition of art. Again, there's no real way to argue that out. But to me at least, my definition of art, not that definition, but like what it's about, right? It's experiencing something, and that doesn't necessarily exclude challenging yourself. That just means you experience like sadness, happiness, joy, and whatnot. Because like there are some games that are just feel good games that feel really good to play, and some games that feel very depressing to play. And I think those games are both fine. I just don't necessarily think the point of art is to challenge you, because I don't necessarily think you have to have an entire medium to exist to challenge you. Because I think you could just challenge yourself by yourself without anything else. You know, it feels redundant.
But you guys don't care about that, okay? What you care about is like, damn dog, I collected 100% of all the Riddler coins in Arkham City. I'm so, wow. Not one of them was interesting, and I didn't even read the flavor text on any of them because I don't care about it for any reason other than satisfying the ape-brain completionist mindset that is drilling into my skull like a parasite. But you know, whatever, it's fine. It's all the same. It's okay. Everything's the same. Hey, guys,
That does make me feel very restless to play the Arkham games, though. The Arkham City, Arkham Knight games, because I don't really feel like I want to do those completionist stuff, you know, and I do dislike that. So I do agree with them on that, you know.
How many of you have any distinct memory of the last, say, 5 games you played consecutively, or does it all bleed together? Well, video games are just something I mainly play so that I don't have to, like, you know, it basically just occupies the time between me waking up and me falling asleep. It doesn't really matter. You do politics now? How can I do politics with an audience like that? It's like asking me to paint a masterpiece when my canvas is like a flattened dried cowpat that was left in the sun. Isn't art subjective? Some people like X games, some people like Y game. Don't you go postmodern on me. If we give up all artistic critique to the subjectivity crowd, then we'll all be chucking down live service model gameplay for the rest of our lives. It'll all just be...
I don't think that's the implication, but I do think he's been a bit jovial about that. Not really like, okay, so like we shouldn't do this because we shouldn't. I think he's more like joking that about that. But I do agree somewhat that we should not default to subjectivity because that does lead to some bad roads. I think we have to say, alrighty then. Within this given framework that we all like somewhat agree on, right? Because art is inherently subjective, right? But there's intersubjective, which is like a group of people agree on their subjective feelings together, right? This isn't good, or we shouldn't have this be the dominant medium, right?
Destiny 2 gear score grinding, okay? No. We have to have standards. And I will not have the standards of the medium set by people who have to be on Twitter to enjoy the game they're playing. What's your opinion on sports games like Madden? YouTube TOS keeps me from talking about the EA sports games. What is a good game? Play Pathologic. It's designed to make all of you as miserable as I feel right now. If art is about experiencing a range of human emotion, then let's talk about something that will reflect my emotional state. Yes. Yeah. Okay, let's show somebody smarter than chat, with better opinions than chat. A brain-damaged infant cat.
Now I will be skipping this bit. Cute cat, but I'm skipping it just to get to the other point.
Feel really called out for that Destiny 2 comment. You deserved it. Vaush Pathologic is good because of its open world exploration element. Totally fucking yeah, you're catching a man. If you, I don't care if it's fake. If you seriously think the appeal of Pathologic is its open world exploration, yeah, dude, that's the point of Pathologic. You have all the time in the world to go explore the open world. Yeah, no, Q, no, you're not getting away. You're not getting away with that one. Not in my favorite game. Not in this house. Q, double permanent. Oh man, dude, day one can pop up on the screen. 11 days remain. 11 days. That's plenty of time to explore the map. We just go out into this cool barren landscape around the city where the fog encompasses everything. Oh wow, there's nothing out here except for Twygreen, which.
I do think that is some issues with a lot of people in the gaming community and not really understanding what games are about, or at least what they're trying to be about. You know. I don't like Pathologic, a very big hot take there, you know. But I do see the point of it and appeal of it and how good it is. But I just don't necessarily like it for that, you know. But again, and if someone misunderstands what Pathologic is, you know, I don't necessarily think there's a lot you can enjoy from it. Not because you can't, but because that's not the point of the game, you know. The game has been built around a specific idea, and if you're not engaging in that idea, you're kind of like missing the point, right? It's like, I play, how do you say, which games? I play like, oh boy, I'm blanking now. Bloody heck. Okay, so like, a game I played, I don't really want to use the example, but I'll do it anyways. I played Doom, right? The original Doom, right? And I don't really like it a lot. I think it's a bit boring to me, you know? But that's because I'm not playing it for its real reason, which is the gameplay, right? I'm playing it for, like, story bits, which is obviously going to be less enjoyable, right? And when I fix my mindset on that, it's a lot more enjoyable. Doom becomes a lot more enjoyable within that framework than if you just think of it as a story thing, right? And, again, I think a lot of people have issues with that.
Look, that. Does all this stuff apply to World of Warcraft? Yeah! People have been talking about World of Warcraft having an exploitative gameplay model for a long time. It's only gotten worse. Now they time date like 50 trillion elements.
I don't think it's gotten worse. I think it's gotten better, actually. From my understanding, Dragonflight has actually gone, is really good about it, you know. But it's still an MMORPG, and I still don't like it.
Russian. You can't do anything in that game without activating some kind of better play next week mechanic, so I should stop playing those games? Yes. I genuinely feel like for a lot of people, if you could just like, if you could just take these games away from them, force them to play good ones, I feel like you all grow up, have better opinions. You hate completionists? No, I'm a completionist. I like getting 100% if it's a good game deserving of it. this is applied to The Witcher 3 with its open world and its crafting. Those elements really didn't. Those aren't the parts of The Witcher that any of you guys remember. Because guys, when I remember The Witcher 3, I remember like all of the amazing narrative beats, the character moments, the dialogue. I don't remember wandering around the hillside, occasionally getting molested by a group of bandits or like a group of gnolls or whatever. I don't remember any of that, like at all. That was the majority of the experience. It would have been better if they cut it all out. The main problem is a lot of games want to have a big open world for its grandiosity and for its size and its spectacle. But I'm not impressed by a big world. Any game dev studio can do that. Indie games are building open worlds these days. Christ, if the spectacle's not there, if it doesn't serve the gameplay, then it shouldn't be used. Pathologic has an ostensibly open world. Not that you'll have time to see it on your own pace.
I do agree with the Witcher 3 remark. I didn't really like it because I felt like it really destroyed the pacing. And I remember very distinctly when I was doing the open world, just to do everything right. I went to a part where you're supposed to go for the quest. I remember when I activated, I saved before, and then I activated it. And I was like, oh, okay, this is the story bit. Okay, I'm not going here then, because I didn't want to continue the story without finishing everything else, right? I wanted to finish everything else, which really ruins the pacing and really takes you out of the like experience of it. And I do agree with him on that, you know. Though I do think like again, open worlds can be used well. It's just like most people don't use it really well. And from my understanding, The Witcher 3 was supposed to be more linear, similar to Witcher 1 and 2, but they changed it to be more open world. And I don't get it, you know, I don't get that. I think the only part in The Witcher 3 that could be open world is like Skellige, and that's it. And like Novigrad, because Novigrad's a city, and I think it's really cool that Novigrad is so big, you know. But that's it, you know. I don't really think there's anything else that really needs to be open world in The Witcher 3.
But the point of the open world isn't to give you some like grand spectacle to appreciate. The point of it is to give you a large environment to fucking miserably traipse around in as you try futilely to stop the worst thing ever from happening to everyone. It perfectly matches the point of the game. If the game is about the emotional experience of misery and depression and futility, the size of the map gives you it perfectly. You could not have Pathologic without the way its game map is structured. You could effortlessly have Horizon Zero Dawn or this, that, the other, or whatever without the open world. Because the open world is just superfluous spectacle bait that they've drizzled on top. It doesn't in any way complement the game structures that they've provided, other than the inane crafting RPG elements bullshit, which very rarely adds anything other than like Skinner box jerk off value. The open world boom really ruined a whole generation of gamers. Yeah, it did clearly. What do you think about the Wild's open world? Well, the point of
I think what like really ruined a lot of games is that not necessarily the developers, but I think also the reaction to those games and how because there's this a lot of times, at least I see in a gaming community, is that there's this very universal mindset to how games should be made. That some games to make up there is a perfect game and exists, and it's like Skyrim, right? Like and that's how, from my memory, when I watched a lot of reviews and read a lot of stuff in 2011 when like Skyrim released, I was like, a lot of people were saying this is the perfect game and games should emulate Skyrim because it got everything right, which again is a very big misunderstanding on what games are, what Skyrim was trying to do, but also on like what games should be. They shouldn't be the same. They shouldn't be universal. There isn't like one design principle. It's just these games do this thing and they do this thing well. Right, and gamers should understand that there's no like singularly perfect game. There's only good games for you and like for the people that agree with you, you know. And again, I don't think it's just like a developer thing. I do think it's a misunderstanding from like the gaming community as well, because I remember very vividly a lot of games that were pretty good to me, but terribly disliked by a lot of other people, because it wasn't like this universal idea of what a game should be.
The point of Breath of the Wild is mostly the exploration, and the exploration does remain fairly novel and interesting in a way that a lot of these games don't. Keep in mind that we're not talking about like all types of open worlds here.
I do disagree with him saying like novel and whatnot, because again, if something has to be novel for it to be good, I don't really think that's a sustainable thing, right? Eventually you're going to run up against the wall where like every novel thing has been done, and so nothing is good anymore, right? Which I don't think is a good way to think or a way to judge things. But again, I can't really argue against that because, you know, it's entirely subjective.
Breath of the Wild is like able to use its open world to the benefit of its gameplay, which it does, and I think it's a lot more defensible. A ton of the open world in Breath of the Wild is about like not just the spectacle of having a large world, but the like emotional experience of like coming across new stuff, which is not the case in Horizon Zero Dawn, because I played that game. There was no mystery or like wonder there. Okay, there just isn't. Oh, Elden Ring did this too, by the way. Elden Ring did a phenomenal job creating like natural vistas, where when you guys, the wonder you feel while playing Elden Ring and like entering a new area is borderline magical. That's talent. Okay, if you're gonna have an open world, and I have problems with Elden Ring's open world, but if you're gonna have one, use it for something. Don't just build it, just like copy paste a grass texture across.
Again, the big issue with like open worlds obviously is like a lack of incentive to engage them from like a gameplay and a story perspective, because a lot of open worlds are just very big levels, which I do agree with, you know.
like 5 square miles and sprinkle a bunch of red herbs across it. Like the point of the open world in Elden Ring wasn't the craftable materials. Getting craftable materials in Elden Ring is incredibly easy. You literally like you spawn a bonfire. There's like 5 trillion of them just right around. It's superfluous. It's underbaked. It's underdeveloped. But the open world there does serve like really interesting exploration. And I think a lot of people who play that game have like magical memories of entering Caelid, for example, or of like going into the underground. Remember the Sophia River or whatever? Like yeah, that's really nice. But those were used like meaningfully. What about the open world in Death Stranding? The open world in Death Stranding is fine because the literal point of Death Stranding is traversing and parkour.
And this is where you're going to see like the transition. A lot of Vaush's takes right on media starts out very like fiery and very confrontational, but as it continues on, it gets more agreeable because he gets more specific with his language, and then he's like, okay, I agree with you. Then it's just the initial points which are very hard to how do you say agree with, you know.
Coring your way across an open world with packages on your back. That is a direct relationship between the open world and the gameplay. The whole point is like which route do you take. Having that be linear would not. There wouldn't even be a game then. It would just be a walking sim. Having it open gives you choices in a meaningful way. You know, but this is just not. I love Vaush making constant exceptions to his dumb rules. You just don't understand the rules. Maybe there's a reason I like these games. You seriously think there's no distinction between the utilization of an open world and say Horizon Zero Dawn and Breath of the Wild or Elden Ring or Death Stranding, a game which is not even remotely like the other ones we're talking about here? Like,
I do think there is a good criticism to have here because he doesn't like set out what he thinks makes a good open world game, or if an open there can be a good open world game. He just like continues to go through, right? He doesn't like establish the facts and whatnot, and that's necessarily fine, right? That's his style and whatnot. But that does create some confusion when you hear these two things. But if you do think about it for a bit, it does make sense.
Like, you just don't know. You don't know the difference because you're not smart enough. You're not experienced enough with any of these. You haven't played any of these games. You're a protoplasm. You're a zygote. In most states in the U.S., your mother could still legally abort you. I hate you. These games are so different. You can't compare. It's not even remotely similar. Holy shit. I love that Vaush is a moral anti-realist, but he apparently has very firm opinions on what essentially good and bad video game design is. The problem that I have is that like people don't even understand what I'm saying. I feel like I'm being pretty clear. They've no like it's like well, you have a problem with open worlds with RPG crafting elements. Well, what about famous RPG crafting open world game? Pathologic. And it's like, okay, well then you weren't listening to what I was saying. What do you think about the open world Shadow of the Colossus? That's a lot like Fury. The point of it is for pacing. The point of it is to like pace out like the emotional highs and lows and the gameplay experience. That's you're not meant to like search every corner of the open world there. You go from A to B with a bit of exploration and platforming, and I think it's a good way of like world building too. Yeah. My problem isn't with your general points, it's how much of an elitist prick you are about them. Whose YouTube stream are you watching? Have you played Fear and Hunger, and if so,
yeah, which like is definitely the big issue with a lot of his points and very hard to consume and whatnot. Again, it's his points. That's how he makes it. Yeah.
Like I tried playing Fear and Hunger too, but that game was a bit too esoteric for me. I respect the hell of it though. I highly recommend Cyberpunk 2077. I don't think I'm gonna like Cyberpunk 2077. I don't think I will. So open worlds are good as long as they're utilized in an interesting and not tedious way. Yeah, like I was saying from the get-go, the problem that I have is with game development.
I think open world games are good if they are executed well, not necessarily and for their purpose, right? Not for like for like just to have a big level, you know. I agree with that. More than like what he says, like it has to be done interesting in novel ways, because that implies like something different. It's like you have to have something interesting. Like what's interesting then? And you have to have something like novel. Okay, what's novel then? Right? It asks a bit too many questions and implies that there is an eventual limit that will make all games after that just objectively bad. You know, which I don't really agree with.
Studios that are trying to make returns on their obscenely expensive games, padding them out by adding open world segments, RPG elements, and crafting as a way of like padding through Skinner box mechanics. It's the same thing that Ubisoft does. You can literally Google Ubisoft map screen, and like everyone immediately knows what I'm talking about, right? Like the Ubisoft map screen is infamous because in every Ubisoft game, like Assassin's Creed or whatever else, like they make a map and they dot it with a ton of bullshit that is, let's be clear, not interesting. It's a bunch of safe houses, racing challenges, whatever, but they're like little nuggets of popcorn gameplay that don't serve to challenge, excite, innovate, or like entrance you at all. They're literally just there to fill up a map screen because it draws out the game. It pads it out. It wastes your time. I don't have anything against map markers or like a map having icons to guide you towards content. That's fine. I have a problem with it just being like thrown out there. Like, here's Far Cry. Like,
I haven't played the new Assassin's Creed. Oh, I mean, I've played Origins, right? But I haven't played like Valhalla or Odyssey, right? I played Assassin's Creed 1 to 3 and Origins. I haven't played anything else because, to me at least, my big issue with the Assassin's Creed games isn't that like it's full of map icons and it's very difficult to play, right? It's because, to me, I dislike the fact that they're not ending, and that's my big issue with them. But like to go on the point of like what he was saying, Assassin's Creed 1 definitely has this issue, but to a less degree, right? Because what a lot of the early Assassin's Creed games used the open world for was a traversal mechanic, right? Was to make the world feel a lot more real, more believable, but and to also have traversal mechanics, because part of Assassin's Creed's identity is the parkour mechanics, right? Using your knowledge on how parkouring works, so you can scale buildings, go through areas faster and whatnot, instead of just like walking on the ground. It's part of the gameplay loop essentially. Traversal mechanics are an easy way to incorporate open worlds into the gameplay mechanics. Not all of them do it well. Like if you have a horse and whatnot, that is technically engaged. That is technically a traversal mechanic, but it's not as engaging as like parkouring, you know.
But again, like I'm not principally opposed. Here, okay, map screen, Assassin's Creed,
and again,
Valhalla.
You
it's
can,
like actually this looks.
That's not supposed to happen. You can see, like he says, he's not principally opposed to these things, but obviously, over later on, he jokingly says, "No open world game should ever exist ever again." Again, this is part of the video where it's like you can agree with him more and more. So if like you cut out like up to this point, like after the cat, right, and just watch from there, it's a lot more agreeable than the earlier parts, which is a lot more like disagreeable. Not because he's wrong, but because he makes it very easy to disagree with him.
Not as bad as the other games. Maybe they dialed it down recently. I haven't played recent Assassin's Creed games.
And this isn't the full map of Valhalla. Valhalla is a lot bigger than this. This is the I believe the beginning of the game, which is a lot more easier. But later on, you get like access to, I think, like a large amount of England. Not like real scale, but like it's supposed to represent a lot of England. So yeah.
For obvious reasons, because the trash series. This one looks more manageable, yeah, than the other ones. It used to be a lot worse. If I went like Far Cry 4, Just Cause does this as well, doesn't it? Isn't Far Cry 4 Far Cry Primal, or is that a different one? Oh God. This is from a Reddit post. This is what a completed Just Cause 2 map screen looks like. So just so you guys know, Just Cause is like the apex of the bad design decisions that I'm talking about here. Just Cause 2's map is like 8 billion miles wide. It's huge. The game has like planes and a grappling hook and stuff, and it's like you can get around super easy. That's fun. But most of this landscape is just empty nothing. It's like there's nothing there. It's just like spectacle for the sake of spectacle. But like yeah, how long did it take them to do this? Who asked? I was probably around 300 out of 368 settlements complete on my most recent run. Are they truly having an innovative and engaging artistic experience, or is this something to just do? Because people do things.
I imagine they are having fun, right? There is an enjoyment of having like a progression of going from nothing to something, right? There is something like meaningful in that one. But this is a very big difference on like a very fundamental thing between me and him.
That they just do all the time. It's fun. Is it? People will defend. Like, people say that about WoW and then they kill themselves. I don't trust you people. You don't know what's good for you. No, it's tedious. It was a podcast game for me. Thank you for being honest. It's not like I don't play podcast games too. Like, try to make them better than this. Not every game has to be art. Ooh, if you weren't a sub. You're seeing, look, being a sub does protect you sometimes. Because if you were a white name, it'd be over for you. All games are art. People can have different opinions. No. So video game cases where you become an authoritarian, dictate what's good or what's bad. Why are all of you people getting indignant? I'm a moral anti-realist, and all of my political content is me talking with the highest level of moral authority I'm capable of mustering about how I'm right and conservatives are wrong. You'll watch me spend 3 hours talking about how Matt Walsh is a demon, and then you're, oh wow, so now we're being authoritarian about our tastes. It's all my taste. It's authoritarianism in the context of moral anti-realism. I'm just sharing my perspective. I make arguments for it, but it's not like there's any difference in like the concrete empirical moral defensibility of my positions because I don't believe in that. This is bad. Okay, I think we're good. I think I'm awake now. That was all good. Only took an hour and 19 minutes. All right, close that. Holy shit, I'm so frustrated by the amount of people who have no idea what they're talking about. I work in the game industry and Vaush is right, of course. Freddie, when you invariably quit the industry or KYS over how terrible the video game industry is, I want you to remember all the people in chat who are like, dude, like, what's wrong with like the stuff? I want you to remember all those people, okay? I want you to remember the villains in this engagement. What are your top 3 recommendations for gaming experiences besides Pathologic? Okay, you're right. That's actually a good question. I should probably end on like a positive note.
This is obviously the point of the video where it's like the no more points are going to be made. So if you can hop off here. And if you did watch up to this point, thank you so much, and enjoy your day. But I'm going to continue onwards because I do want to talk about some other stuff that he will bring up, his game recommendations as well.
Not exactly hot takes here. Hollow Knight is definitely the best Metroidvania game ever made. It's incredibly challenging from a gameplay perspective if you decide to take it that far, but it maintains its interest the whole way through. This is an example of like an open world done well, because the point of a Metroidvania is to construct an open world that like holds your interest with its novelty and the challenges that each area offers you, and it excellently paces itself with regards to its like upgrades and everything. It's a phenomenal game. There's a reason everyone loves it. There's a ton of content for it. I strongly recommend it. It's also a mostly silent game, which means that if you guys really like listening to podcasts while playing, that's like 50 hours of content right there. High quality, artistically engaging content that you can also like listen to stuff over because the game's music is beautiful.
And to me, I don't really enjoy Hollow Knight because of that. Hollow Knight is very boring to me because I feel like I'm not really doing anything, you know? The game doesn't give me any context to what I'm doing, and the context that it does give, you have to root around a lot of the world and whatnot to get anything, and I just don't like that. I really think that's very boring to me, and I prefer different games that are more cinematic and whatnot.
But it doesn't have like a ton of audio elements, you know, so you can do a bit more there. I'm just not a fan of the art style. That's okay. That's your right. And if you want like a more deliberately structured experience, that's maybe a bit more retro. System Shock 2, really good. It has audio elements. You do not want to miss Showdown or any of the audio logs. Like you don't want to have a podcast over that. But I feel like
now I do think System Shock 2 is a lot more playable for me, but I do still dislike it because one of the big things I have an issue with games is that your character doesn't talk, right? And that's a big issue for me because like your character should talk because that makes sense within like the context of the story, right? They're a person with their own actions and beliefs and whatnot, and they should participate within the game, right? If they shouldn't participate in the game, and that's the point of it, then don't make them a person, right? Make them something else, you know?
like the game's a masterclass in like basically being the apex of its
like make them a robot or whatever, right? Or make them something that is mute by default, right? Which makes a lot more sense for me, at least.
Immersive sim genre. You could swap this out for Deus Ex. I think Deus Ex and System Shock 2 are about as good as each other. Maybe Deus Ex is better, but I have more fond memories of System Shock 2. You could go either. They're both really, 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 really good. So it's both really good. What's like a third one that I really want to? Which Deus Ex? The original Deus Ex, the one that came out in 2000, 2001, thereabouts. Okay. Those are both really good. And then Blotto, you're completely correct. Outer Wilds. Outer Wilds, we played this one on stream. Outer Wilds is basically like ego death that you would get from a shroom trip condensed into a game for a game to convey the emotion.
And again, I'm just not a big fan of Outer Wilds either. Not that it's bad. Again, I don't really have fun with games that are like that are fairly artsy in a bit. And additionally, because again, I don't play games to like. I play games to like feel something, right? Because I feel like it conveys like an emotion, right? But I don't think it like Outer Wilds is meant to make you think about something a lot more grander, which I feel like I could just do by myself, right? Which I often do.
Like information necessary to be comparable to a drug trip, I think, is a huge testament to its quality. It is a legit masterpiece, and more people need to play it. Outer Wilds is unbelievably good. So fucking good. It's ridiculously good. You can also play podcasts over, but you probably shouldn't, because it's really good. You probably want to listen and kind of like embrace the tone and the mood of the area that you're in. It's basically like a toy box puzzle game, where you explore universe. Okay, nice. What do you think about Disco? Disco Elysium is really good, but it's also a lot more niche, yes. But it's really, really good. It's really niche. It's good. It's really good. It's niche. It's really, really, really good. It's niche. It's good. Okay, yeah, those are good games. All right. Have you played Hotline Miami? Yes. Do you think video games that don't require thinking to play shouldn't exist? No, I've said, moderate, your brain needs a little bit less resting, because I've said multiple times now that I play games that I listen to podcasts over. I just recommended a game where I was like, yeah, you can podcast over. Like, your brain needs less rest. It needs to wake up. Opinions on Terraria. Terraria is really good. What do you think of Inscription? Inscription's really good. Thoughts on No Man's Sky? I don't care for it. You should play Katana Zero. Didn't enjoy it. Have you played Down 4? No. But I played Brain World. Have you played?
And that's basically it. There are some other points being made in this section here, but they're mostly reiterations of the rest of the video. And again, it's gone on for long enough that I think it's okay to end now. So yeah, again, I think this is necessary. Not bad, but I do think there are some issues with how he conveys his points and some implications that I don't really agree with, right? His early point with God of War Ragnarok, right? Like, again, I don't really think it's true that, like, God of War Ragnarok wasn't spoken about, but I don't really think that's, like, the point. I think it's irrelevant, you know? I don't really think it matters if a game is talked about or not talked about, as long as it's, like, done well, you know? So yeah, again, if you enjoyed this, do say in the comments below. I would like to hear that. And yeah, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.